Good day everyone, my name is Marvin Cabalquinto. Today I will discuss the chapter 3 entitled Evidence in Crime. This chapter presents the importance of criminal evidence, types of evidence, proper preservation of evidence. It also includes the proper collecting, marketing, tagging, and preserving of the collected pieces of physical evidence. Evidence is very important to solve a crime. Lesson 1, Evidence. Definition of evidence. First, evidence in its legal definition is the means, sanctioned by these rules, of ascertaining in judicial proceeding the truth respecting a matter of fact. So, in the other meaning, evidence also refers to any material which tends to persuade the court of the truth or probability of some alleged or asserted before it. There are three types of evidence. First, oral testimony. Second, documentary. And the last one is real and circumstantial evidence. In the other meaning, evidence refers to all the means by which any alleged matter of fact whose truth is investigated at judicial trial is established or disproved. The term evidence, as it relates to investigation, speaks to a wide range of information sources that might eventually inform the court to prove or disprove point of issue before the trier of fact. Source of evidence are anything from the observation of witnesses to the examination and analysis of physical object. It can even include the spatial relationship between people, places, and objects within the timeline of events. From the various of form of evidence, the court can draw inferences and reach a conclusion to determine if a charge has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Evidence forms the building blocks of the investigative process, and for the final product to build the properly, evidence must be recognized, collected, documented, protected, validated, analyzed, disclosed, and presented in a manner which acceptable to the court. Upon reaching the crime scene, measures must be imposed to the members of the response officers. Rules must be strictly followed in order to properly preserve all kinds of evidence. Next is the three forms of evidence in criminal investigation. Number one is physical evidence, or object or autoptic or real evidence. It refers to physical object used as evidence which is obtained through searches at the scene of the crime. It refers to article and material found in connection with investigation, which aid in establishing the identity of the perpetrator. Legally, objects evidence refers to evidence made known or addressed to the senses of the court. It is not limited to that which is known through the sense of vision, but is extended to what the scene of hearing, taste, smell, and touch is perceived. It may include the following. First is firearms and fired ammunitions. The second is knife or bolo. The third is blood, semen, saliva, human or animal, biological samples. In the fourth, finger and footprints. The fifth, tool marks and tire tracks. And the sixth is hairs, fibers, glass, paint, and other traces evidence. The next is category of physical evidence. Number one is associative evidence. These are pieces of evidence which links a person to a crime. The offender may leave clues at the scene of such a weapon, tools, garments, fingerprints, or foot impression. Broken headlights glass found at the crime scene in hit and run. Wearing apparel of the offender and other articles of value may be recovered at the rape scene. Number two is tracing evidence. These are evidence that may assist the investigator in locating the suspect, aircraft, or ship manifest. Physicians, clinic record showing medical treatment of suspect for injuries sustained in an encounter, blood stain recovered from the area traversed by the wounded suspect in for direction of the movement are example of tracing evidence. Trace evidence is a subtle category of physical evidence that is minute and transient but measurable. Typically, this evidence does not appear until larger items of physical evidence are subjected to closer examination in the laboratory. So, in the B, biological and transient evidence. Number one is biological evidence. So, it is refers to evidence that is commonly recovered in crime scene. Each biological evidence has a unique importance and its own probative value. It is evidence that can be tested through DNA, mapping, and other profiling methods. It consists of bodily fluids and tissues that has a particular significance since DNA analysis can be conducted in many instances. Some biological evidence that has DNA include blood, saliva, semen, slough skin cells, hair, urine, and fecal material. Number two is number two is transit evidence. So transit evidence, it refers to evidence that by its very nature can be easily changed or lost. For instance, transit evidence includes temperature, odor, blood in the rain, and some biological physical phenomenon. It indicates elements of physical evidence that might be expected to degrade the disappear within a particular time frame. It will lose its evidentiary value if not preserved and protected. So, what is corpus delicti? So, it is a Latin term for the body of the crime. It is the legal term used to describe physical or material evidence that a crime has been committed, such as the corpse of a murder victim or the clean of a thatched building. It is used to refer the underlying principle that without evidence of crime having been committed, it would be unjust to convict someone. So, so next is C, other specific kind of physical evidence. Number one is soil. So this consists of organic natural materials such as rocks, minerals, and decomposing plant, and may also contain man-made materials such as bricks, concrete, glass, or paint. The densities of soil samples are analyzed via chemical that separate the particles that comprise the soil. If pattern of separation is similar, it indicates a match. This common scientific technique of analyzing soil is called the density gradient tube. So number two is paint. So the paint is a pigmented polymer that is applied and adheres to various surfaces. It is possible to examine the microscopically the color and shape of paint strips or other samples, as well as the determined through the use of gas chromatography. The next is number three is tool mark. So the tool mark is any mark that is created when an instrument has contact with another surface. So the mark left by the tool may indicate the type of tool, the size of tool, and even the skills of the perpetrator. Number 4 is shoe prints and impressions. The shoe prints are created when material from the bottom of shoes is transferred to another surface, leaving an outline of the bottom of the shoe. Shoe impressions are often left in soft material such as mud, snow, and reveal the outline of the shoe or tire. So next is videotape evidence. So in the videotape evidence, it is a potentially extremely powerful form of evidence. If a crime is captured on video, there may be little doubt about who committed the crime. So number 6 is dental evidence. The two primary kinds of dental evidence are dental identification and bite marks. In both instances, the fact that an individual has a unique set of teeth in terms of form, arrangement, dental work, and bite make dental evidence power form of criminal evidence. The physical characteristic of bite marks and dental identification consists of the distance between teeth, the shape and mouth or bite, teeth alignment, teeth shape, missing teeth, and wear patterns of the teeth. And number 7 is computer and other electronic evidence. Computers, cellular phones, and personal digital assistants may provide a wealth of information regarding communications, schedule, and criminal behaviors, and therefore are potentially valuable sources of evidence in criminal investigation. Examination of electronic hardware is quite technical in nature and, if not properly performed, can be result in a loss of evidence. So, importante gud ni siya. So, next is, the second is testimonial evidence. It is also known as eyewitness testimony or communicative evidence. So, nadiri ang mga communications, mga witness, mga testimony. So, it is a product of the interview and interrogations from which witness smell, hear, taste, and touch are being described through oral and written testimony. So, it refers to a person's testimony offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, especially evidence elicited from a witness. Oral or written assertion affirmed in a court as a proof of the truth of what is being stated. So, next is the kind of testimonial evidence. Number 1 is ordinary witness. So, in the ordinary witness, any persons who perceive the commission of a crime and testified before the court is just considered as the ordinary witness. Also, physicians who testified in a court on matter of perceived from his patient in the course of physician-patient relationship is considered as an ordinary witness. A witness can testify only to those facts which he knows of his own knowledge, that is, which are derived from his own perception, except as otherwise provided on these rules. Number 2 is expert witness. So expert witness is a person whose testimony concerning the investigation of crime is based on his training of exercise and experience. Hence, physicians who confirm before the court the cause of death of a victim is considered as an expert of witness. So next is who is a witness? So kinsa ba gyud mga witness. So sila tong mga taong na mga naka-witness, no, nakasaksi gyud sa mga panghitabo sa krimen o nakakita gyud siya actually. So who is the witness? A person who testified under oath in a trial or a deposition in a lawsuit. The plaintiff or defendant may be witness. Witness have the first-hand knowledge about matters relevant to the case, and their testimony is subject to the applicable rules of evidence. In its legal definition, it refers to the person who can perceive and perceiving can make their own perception to others may be witnesses. And what is depositions? So it is a testimony takes an orally with an attorney asking question and the deponent or the individual being questioned answering while a court reporter or tape recorder or something both records testimony. This deposition's testimony is generally taken under oath, and the court reporter and the deponent often sign affidavits attesting to the accuracy of the subsequent printed transcript. This position is testimonial evidence. Number 3 is documentary evidence. Documentary evidence refers to writings, including official records or contents that could speak for themselves. When read by the investigators and the court, it consists of writings or any materials containing letters, words, numbers, figures, symbols, or other modes of writing expression offered as a proof of their contents. So documentary evidence are but not limited to the following. So first is birth and death certificates, and second is necropsy report, and the third is medical examination. So next is lesson 2, legal classification of evidence. So A, ability to establish a fact in a dispute of evidence. The one is direct evidence. So it is that which proves the fact in disputes without the aid of any inference of presumptions. The evidence presented corresponds to the precise or actual points or at issue. So number 2 is circumstantial evidence or indirect evidence. The proof of fact or facts from which taken either singly or collectively, the existence of particular fact in dispute may be inferred as necessary or probable consequence. However, the following requisites must be present before a circumstantial evidence will become sufficient for conviction. in first is there is more than one circumstance. The second is the facts from which the inference are derived are proven, and the combination of all the circumstances is such as to produce a conviction beyond reasonable doubt. And the next is letter B, degree of value in establishing a disputed fact of an evidence. Number 1 is prima facie evidence. This evidence suffices for the proof of a particular fact until contradicted by other evidence. Number 2 is conclusive evidence. So this evidence is incontrovertible or one which the law does not allow to be contradicted. It is insurmountable evidence. So number 3 is corroborative evidence. So this evidence is of different kind and character as that already given and tends to prove the same proposition. And number four is cumulative evidence. This evidence is of the same kind and character as that already given and tends to prove the same proposition. The next is letter C, weight and acceptability of an evidence. Number one is primary or best evidence. This evidence affords the greatest certainty of the fact in questions. Number two, secondary or substitutionary evidence. This evidence is inferior to primary evidence and admissible only in the absence of the latter. The next is letter D, nature of an evidence. So number one is object of evidence. So this evidence is addressed to the senses of the court and is capable of being exhibited to be examined or viewed by the court. This is also known as autoptic evidence or real evidence. Number two is documentary evidence. So this refers to evidence supplied by written instrument or derived from the conventional symbols and letters by which ideas are represented for material substances. And number three is testimonial evidence. This evidence is either verbal or oral. It is an evidence which consists of the narration or disposition by one who has observed or has personal knowledge of that to which he is testifying. And the number four is positive evidence. This evidence exists if the witness affirms that a fact did or did not occur. It is entitled to greater weight since the witness represents his personal knowledge about the presence or absence of a fact. The next is letter D, nature of an evidence. So number one is object evidence. This evidence is addressed to the senses of the court and capable of being exhibited to be examined or viewed by the court. This is also known as autoptic evidence or real evidence. Number two is documentary evidence. This refers to evidence supplied by written instrument or derived from conventional symbols and letters by which ideas are represented for material substances. Number three is testimonial evidence. This evidence is either verbal or oral. It is an evidence which consists of the narration or depositions by one of who has observed or has personal knowledge of that to which is terrifying. Number four, positive evidence. So this evidence exists if the witness affirms that a fact did or did not occur. It is entitled to greater weight since the witness represents his personal knowledge about the presence or absence of fact. And number five is negative evidence. This evidence exists if the witness states that he did not see or know of the occurrence of a fact and there is total disclaimer or personal knowledge. And the letter E is equality of an evidence. So number one is relevant evidence. So the relevant evidence is relevant if it has relation to the fact in issue as to include belief in its existence or not existence. Number two is material evidence. This evidence tends to prove the fact in issue and is determined by the rules of substantive law or rules of court. And number three is admissible evidence. So this evidence is admissible if it is relevant to the issue and is not excluded by the rules of court. And number four, credible evidence. So evidence is credible if it is not only admissible evidence but also believable and used by the court of in deciding cases. So lesson 3, collecting, marketing, tagging, and preserving evidence. So in the process of investigation, the responding team should be knowledgeable on the proper action to be done and specific kinds of evidence found in the scene of the crime. The proper methods in collecting, marketing, tagging, and preserving evidence that must be observed are the following. So, letter A, collecting physical evidence. All items that were found in the crime scene should be collected. The collecting officers should not decide whether a certain item is relevant or irrelevant. Small pieces of evidence also must have not to be given importance, thus collecting them is necessary. So, number one is blood. So, it is an important evidence in homicide, assaults, robberies, or other cases where it may be spilled. It is categorized into the major groups of A, B, and O depending on the condition of the stain of receipt. So, in collecting of liquid blood, you use clean, reusable pipette or eyedropper for each sample collected. The second is place the sample in a container, avoiding air space because air will cause the blood to dry. So, if the amount of blood is minimal, collection may best be made by placing the sample in a normal saline solution or 1 tablespoon salt in 1 quart of distilled water. So refrigerate samples in saline solution as soon as possible. Do not mix areas where samples are collected, and above all, avoid contaminating the samples by reusing collecting tools. So bawal siya gamit og usab kay para dili siya ma-unsawa. So next is collection of dried blood. So on observant surfaces, bring in the entire object or cut out the stains area and bring to the laboratory. So on non-absorbent surfaces, scrap up and sample and place in container, or if possible, submit the entire article. So if sample is scrapped from surface, also crop a portion of a surface where no blood is present and submit in a separate container for control in a case some substance on the surface causes difficulty in test. And lastly is collection of wet blood on clothing. So do not fold the clothing as it may destroy the stain pattern, and do not package while the stain is still wet. So when you allow the clothing to dry in a room before packaging, and do not expose to sunlight or high temperature as they may destroy factors which will determine blood typing. So next is hair. So number 2 is hair. This may be found anywhere in the crime scene. So it is often found in the clothing of victims and suspects who have come into physical contact with each other. It can be very important. So, evidence, especially in rape cases, in the most cases, there are rarely enough samples present for the positive identification of an individual. However, it can be determined if the hair is on animal or human, whether the hair is dyed or bleached, if the hair is from the head or body, as well as the racial origin or of hair. So in the hair, they are collecting of hair. So take sample of head hair from the top, the back, each side of the head. And the second is take by combing, pulling or cutting close to it. And the third is take at least a dozen of hair from each location in rape cases. So take two samples from both the victims and the suspect. So the first is taken by combing and the second is by the cutting and pulling. So the next is each of these samples should be collected in separate containers and properly labeled, and identify hair carefully so as to exact location found, and do not mix hair found in several locations, and place the hair in folder proper and put it an envelope in glass vial and seal. And the last is do not tape the hair to an object as it will alter the hair and destroys any debris adhering to it. So dapat siya nakaseal. So number 3 is fingernail scraping. So in this case where physical contact has been made, fingernail scraping should be obtained. So rape cases or assault cases are good example of cases where fingernail scraping may be important. So kung sa rape man kay scratch mo tungod sa kanang wala mo musukol ang biktima or maglaban, or sa o sa assault maglaban. So this is a good example. So items sometimes found under fingernails includes fibers, hairs, and skin which may be type for its blood groups. So collection of fingernails. So first is clean each fingernail with a clean fingernail file. The second is place the scraping from each finger on already labeled paper with notation of which finger it came from. And the third is place the scraping from each finger in a separate envelope or glass vial. And the fourth is fingernail scraping should be obtained from both the victim and the suspect. And the last is if the subject had is contaminated with blood, note this on the container. Number 4 is fiber. So fiber, it is excellent as tracing evidence when clothing cross contamination takes place. So this is also important evidence in robbery and hit and run cases. Fiber may be found in clothing smudged on projection and even embedded with vehicle paint. Examination of fiber determines whether it is a natural or synthetic material, the color and dye used. It may be physical match if the fragment was torn from clothing. Threads may be examined to determine twist, number of strands, and clothing width. In the fiber is a in the fiber collecting treats the packaged fibers in the same manner as hair. The next is be extremely careful not to cross-contaminate during the collection process. Third is collect the clothing which is considered to be the source of the fibers. And the last is do not shake the items as this may be dislodge the fibers. And number five is glass. So it can be improved evidence in robberies and hit and run cases also. It may be found as a trace evidence in clothing and shoes. Glass is usually examined to determine if both the evidence sample and the known standards as the same physical properties and trace elements as impurities. Additional examination can be made to determine from which side force was applied. So the glass broken by fire shows a different pattern because the breaking is induced by differences in examinations of glass. Physical match of glass from the crime scene to glass found in suspect professions is a good possibility. From collection of glass, first is collect from each broken glass at the crime scene. The second is package them individually and glass vials or envelopes. And the third is in hit and run cases, collect all broken glasses to ensure the possibility of a physical match should fragment be found on suspect vehicles. Next is number 6. So number 6 is firearms. So firearms, bullets, shotgun shell, shotgun pellet, and wad. Explosive residue and gunpowder patterns can provide vital evidence and specific answers to possible questions in the case. Collective of firearms. So in firearms must be handled carefully, not only as a safety measure but to avoid disturbing any evidence they may provide. And then the next is they must be properly marked for the latter identifications and never insert anything in the barrel as it may be damage the identifying characteristics and dislodge material which may be inside the barrel. And pick up the weapon by the trigger guard or checkered grip so as not to disturb any fingerprints. And unhold but do not wipe or clean the weapon. So when unloading, carefully record the location of fired, unfired, and misfired cartridge. So and record the serial number description of the firearms. Firearms with no serial number should be marked within initials on the receiver or underside of the barrel. Never use X or other non-individual type of marking. Do not mark the weapon on any easily removable part such as the stock or grip. Use discretion so as not to disfigure the weapon. Don't it's the collection of firearms evidence. So never submit a loaded gun to the laboratory unless it is delivered in person. Unfired cartridge may be left in the magazine of a weapon, provided the magazine is removed from the gun. A firearm with a cartridge in the chamber should never be sheathed by any method, even if the weapon is not cocked or on safety. Never clean the bore chamber or cleaner before submitting firearms, and never attempt to fire the gun before the examined in the laboratory. Never pick up a weapon by placing a pencil or other object in the end of the barrel. Record serial number. This is very important. So make, model, and caliber of weapon, and mark it in some of inconspicuous manner that does not distract from its value for sending it to laboratory. Marking firearms is very important since duplicate serial numbers are sometimes found on different guns of the same make and general type, so do not confuse model number or patient numbers with serial numbers. So place weapons in the strong cardboard or wooden boxes, well packed, to prevent shifting of gun on transit. So rifles or shotguns should not be taken apart. If blood or any other material which may be pertain to an investigation is present on the gun, place a clean paper around the gun and seal it with tape to prevent movement of the gun and loss of sample during shipment, and never contaminate the gun for the examination of latent fingerprints. So number 7 is bullet. It can be provide information about the make and type of ammunitions and weapon from which the bullet was fired, and whether or not it was fired from a specific weapon, provided the weapon is available for test purposes. So in collecting of bullet, handle the bullet so as not be dislodge any extraneous materials or damage the markings. If a bullet is lodged in a wood or similar material, cut out the lesion and bring it to the laboratory. At autopsies, request the use of hands or rub tip forceps to minimize the possibility of damage to the bullet. So the last is wrap each bullet separately in tissue and cotton to prevent damage and place in a container. So number 8 is cartridge case. So in the cartridge case, this can also provide vital information as to the type of weapon used, the type of ammunitions, and whether or not the case was fired in a specific weapon, if weapon is available for firearm testing. So this is a collecting of cartridge case. Letter A is handle cartridge case so as not to add any scratches or marks. Letter B is wrap each one separately to prevent damage. And the lastly is be sure to note specific locations in which it was found. Number 9 is seminal stain. So it is often but not always found on clothing, blankets, and sheets. It is also a biological evidence like blood. It must be collected properly to maintain its integrity. So collecting of seminal stain. So allow any stains to air dry, wrap in paper, and package evidence in paper bags, and do not use plastic bags. For sex offense cases, the victim should always be examined by a physician. A sexual assault evidence collection kit is used to collect evidence from the victim. It is very important that the instructions on the kit be followed with the care in order to gain the greatest benefit from the collected evidence. Next is label all garments such as undershorts, panties, or other exhibits and package its garments separately. Next is if damp, allow fabric to dry completely before packaging. And lastly, handle fabrics as little as possible. Next is letter B, marketing of physical evidence. So, as evidence is collected, it is individually marked with the initial of the investigator. The marketing tool depends upon the nature of evidence. So, if it is a hard object such as material, metals, the initials are scratched or engraved by the use of sharp pointed steel called stylus. So the general rules in marketing tools or object as a physical evidence. Number one is mark with initial of recovering officer. Number two is never use X. Number three is record any serial number if applicable and other distinctive mark. Number four, mark the other object without damage. Number five, always mark the container in which the object is placed even if object itself is already marked. Number six, when tags are used, make corresponding entry in the tag and attach it securely to the object. Next is marketing of firearms related. So next is marketing of firearms related evidence. So number one is revolvers. So it must be marked separately on the barrel, frame, butt, cylinder, and stock. Tape should also be put around the bore and frame of the gun with signature of the investigator. Number two is pistols. So it must be marked on the barrel, frame, butt, magazine, and stock. Tape must also be put around the gun with signature to avoid changing the parts of the gun that may affect the results of laboratory examination. So number three is rifles. So it should be marked on the barrel, frame, magazine, bolt, or slide. All magazines and accessories should be marked. Dapat jud na siya itatak. So number 4, fired empty shell and misfired cartridge. It must be marked near the mouth of fired empty shell, not on the body, peripheral surface, or base. And number 5, bullets, slugs, balls, pellets. Bullet or slug can be marked on the agib or nose, as well as in the base, not on the body or bearing surface. Next is tagging evidence. So in tagging evidence, all evidence which by their nature could not be marked on each surface, such as blood, hair, fibers, and the like, properly stored in the appropriate container, after which container is put a tag. Tagging physical evidence is being done which the use card where initials of the investigator, date and time collection, specific case, and other information are written. Letter D is preserving physical evidence. So perishable materials should be preserved along the way, or the preservation is in order to reach the court in the same physical condition as when they were collected from the crime scene. This is the work of a laboratory techniques or SOCO team. It includes number 1, preservation of tools. So Whenever possible, submit the whole object containing tool marks to, to laboratory instead of just removing the area containing the mark. If this is not possible, carefully photograph and sketch the area containing the mark. Although this is photograph will not be sufficient to allow the laboratory to perform a tool mark comparison with the tool. It will assist the laboratory to determine how the mark was made so that the test mark can be more easily made. The next is cast of tool marks can be made by a person who has had considerable experience in this work. Poor casts are useless for comparison purposes, and some marks will be damaged if improper methods are used. And pack the object containing tool marks so no alternation or damage will occur during shipments. Small objects should be wrapped with clean paper and placed in envelopes or boxes, while important area or larger objects can be protected with paper. Whole, large object can be packaged in cartons or crates if not delivered in person. Number two is preservation of controlled substances and medical preparations. So each samples of material recovered should be placed in a paper container and which can be sealed and marked. Be sure to properly seal as long loose materials, particularly in the case of marijuana, can leak and spill. Number three is preservation of question document. So under no circumstances should either question document or the exemplars be marked if defect or altered. No new folds should be made. No should marks or notes be placed on such material. Personally marks for identification purposes should be made as small possible on the back or the area of the document where no handwriting or typewriting is present. Whenever possible, all documents should be protected by placing them in cellophane or plastic envelopes. And shipments of evidence. In the shipment of evidence, question documents may be submitted personally or left in previously described lockers at the laboratory entrance. And next is such evidence as sent to the laboratory by mail must be sent by certified or registered mail. If there is a massive amount of material, it may be sent some other way, but the package must always be sealed. So, charge documents, so work examination and decipherment of charred paper is involved. Great care must be taken to prevent any additional crumbling or breaking apart the burned material. Normally, it should be placed on the top of loose cotton in a box and delivered in a person to the laboratory. And no matter how is packaged, such a material will be damaged if attempts are made to ship it by mail. And the other question documents evidence in the additional to handwriting and typewriting comparisons and the settlement of shared documents. Other related examination can be conducted in the laboratory such as but are not limited to number 1 restoration or disablement of obliterated or erased writing. Number 2 is comparison of the check protectors and rubber stamps with question printing. Number 3 is identification of embossed in indent writing or typing. Number 4 is comparison of paper and commercially printed materials such as checks, coupons, and receipt and others. Number 5, physical matching of cut of term paper of various types. And lastly, problem relating to inks. And number 4 is preservation of latest fingerprint. So the primary prosecution in all cases is the prevention of adding fingerprints to evidence or the destroying those already present. Most fingerprints submitted will be on paper, glass, metal, or other smooth surface objects. If articles containing latex must be picked up, touched as little as possible and only in areas least likely to contain identification latex such as rough surfaces, while gloves on handkerchief may be used to pick up the exhibits. Any unnecessary contact should be avoided, and using clothes will frequently wipe off the smear any prints originally presents unless great care is taken. Latest prints in glass, metal articles, and firearms should be placed on wood or heavy cardboard and fastened down with string to prevent shifting and contact with other objects on transit. Where such as evidence is to be examined frequently, a pegboard should be obtained on which wooden pegs can be moved as desired to support exhibits and keep them from moving. Bottles and glass may be placed vertically on a board and placed in the bathroom or on the bottom of a box. The base of the bottles or glass can be surrounded with nails to hold in place. The top can be either inserted through a hole in a piece of cardboard or held in a position with a wooden board nailed to the contained lid. And lastly, papers and documents containing latest prints should be placed individually in a cellophane or manila envelope. Such as container can be sandwiched between two sheets of stiff cardboard, wrapped and placed in a box for mailing. So, lesson 4, general rules and equipment in processing evidence. So, general rules in the collection and preservation of biological materials. So, number 1 is use protective gloves. So, it is very important to use protective gloves. So, if possible, avoid touching individual smurf traces, and remember that gloves can entail a risk of contaminations, and change gloves after handling each kind of materials and otherwise as necessary, and use disposable equipment for preliminary tests and collections of trace evidence, and in other cover surfaces where materials are to be placed with protective paper. Keep victims and suspects' clothes separate. And number 2 is avoid coughing or sneezing on evidence materials. So, di ka pwede ubo o muatsing kay kasi masa para si mo nga mapasa para si mga unsa na kayo unsa dito or DNA mong laway maunsa sa ebidensya. So, number 3 is packaging of biological materials. So, use packaging for all biological materials or materials that are soiled with biological matter. Although plastic bags are useful in many cases, they cannot be recommended for routine use on account of residual moisture, and separate outer packages are to be used for trace evidence and for clothes from persons involved. And do not mix material sample from different people, for example clothes and the same parcel. And lastly, fold the opening of the bag twice and seal with the tape. Envelope should be also be sealed with tape. And lastly, number 4, special precautions. So make an explicit note if a person from the home material has been collected is suspected of having an infectious disease, and prevent contamination by avoiding all contact between collected evidence and clothing seized from people. And lastly, packages containing collected material must not be opened until the examination in the laboratory is not recommended. The only exception is when moist or wet material must be dried out under the normal room conditions. So next is materials for evidence packaging, marketing, and sealing. So number 1, acceptable packaging containers, or depending on the type of evidence include. So A, paper bags, B, plastic bags, and clear plastic is preferred, drug cases, and C, boxes, so the standard cardboard, and D, manila envelopes, and E, small glass vials, typically arson and liquid drugs, and F, metal cans, typically arsons. So number 2 is acceptable seals, and so in the A is tamper-proof evidence tape, and B, reinforced packaging tape, and C, heat seal. So muna siyang mga ginagamit sa pag-seal sa mga gamit or sa mga ebidensya, mga ginagamit siya sa pag-seal. And number 3 is information in each package should minimally include. The first is name of the agency, the second agency case number, the third is item number, the fourth is date, and the lastly is the investigator's identifier. And number 4 is additionally packaging of evidence should include. First is where the items was found, the second is by whom, and the third is date and time found, and the lastly description of item. So the next is traditional methods of preserving or recording evidence. Number 1 is photographs, audio and videotape, microfilm, photostat, Xerox, video tracing, etc. So photography is considered to be the most practical use and reliable means of preservation due to the following reasons. So first is photo camera is available in many places. So second is the object preserved is reduced in size in the picture proportionately with other objects adjacent or near to it. And the third is an unlimited number of copies can be reproduced, each of which is identical to one another. So identification of voice from the recording instrument may sometimes be difficult. So audio recording may be depending on the speed, volume, pitch, and timbre, which may be changed by the instrument used in the recording, and replying. So next is number 2, sketching. So if no scientific apparatus to preserve evidence is available, then a rough drawing of the scene or object to be preserved is done. It must be simple, identification of significant item and with exact measurement. See more in chapter 4. And number 3 is observation and description. So description is done by the putting into the word the person or thing to be preserved. Describing a thing requires keen observations and a good power of attention, perception, intelligence, and experience. It must be cause vivid impressions on the mind of the reader. True picture of the thing described. The use or portrait parl may be used. So what is portrait parl? Spoken picture. So it refers to verbal, accurate, and pictures description of the person identified, such as information may be given by the witness, relative, or other persons who are acquainted with the physical features of the persons to be identified. The following basic requirements must be included the verbal description. So number 1 is general impression. Type, personality, apparent social status. Number 2, age and sex. Number 3, race or color. Number 4, height. Number 5, weight. Number 6, build, thin, slender, medium, or star. Number 7, posture, erect, slouching, round shoulder. Number 8, head, size and shape. Number 9, hair, the color, length, and baldness. Number 10, face, general impression. And and forehead high, low, building or receding, eyebrows brushy or thin shape, mustache, length, color, shape, ears, size, shape, size of lobe, angle of set, eyes, small, medium, or large, color of eyeglasses, cheeks, high, low, or prominent, medium cheekbones, flat or sunken, nose, short, medium, or big, or long, straight, aquiline, or flat, or pug, mouth, small or medium, general impression, lips, shape, thickness, color, teeth, shade, condition, defect, missing elements, chin, size, shape, general impressions, jaw, length, shape, lean, heavy, or medium. And in the neck, shape, thickness, length, Adam's apple. In the shoulder, wind and shape. In the wrist, size and shape. And hands, length, size, hair, condition of the palms. Fingers, length, thickness, stain, shape of nails, condition of the nails. In arms, long, medium, or short, muscular, normal, or thin, thickness of the twist. And the lastly is feet, size, and deformities. If a skills investigative illustrator is available, a picture of a person to be identified may be drawn or sketched. Cartographic sketch as a check to the sketch or drawing made. It must be shown to the person who gave an information to see whether it is tallies with the person to be identified. If available, the investigator may be look what is commonly called rogues gallery, photographic files wanted or missing person for comparison with cartographic sketch. So next is mannequin method. So in mannequin method, in a miniature model of a scene or a human body, indicating marks of the various aspects of the thing to be preserved. An anatomical model or statue may be used, and injuries are indicated with their appropriate legends, although it may not indicate full detail of lesson. It is quite impressive to the viewer as to the nature and severity of the trauma. Number five is preservation in the mind of the witness. So, a person who perceives something relevant for proper education of a case may be witness in a court if he has the power to transmit to others what the perceived. He would just have to make an recital of his collection. And principal drawbacks or preserving evidence in the mind of the witness are, so this is that they have three. First is the capacity of the person to remember the time, place, and event may be destroyed or modified by the length of the time, age of the witness, confusion with the other evidence, trauma, or disease, thereby making the collection not available. The second is the preservation is coterminous with the life of the witness. If the witness dies, then the evidence is lost. The lastly is human mind can easily be subjected to too many extraneous factors that may cause distortion of the truth. Other person may be influence a witness to serve the interests of another or state untruthful facts to justify an end. And number six is written notes what you have seen or observed. Number seven is developing and lifting fingerprints found at the crime scene. Number eight, gathering physical evidence. Number nine, plaster casts. And number 10, written statement of subjects and witnesses. Next is integrity of trace evidence. Protection of evidence from loss of contamination is essential. One of primary paths of contamination is from the collector to the evidence. The collector must be ensured that no contaminated trace is deposited along the evidence in question. This may include hair or fiber from the collector to prevent contamination. Crime scene personnel must wear personal protective equipment such as gloves and masks and use trace contaminant-free implements when collecting evidence. So what is principle of the custody? So evidence passes through several persons for several purposes. Due to this, the principle of chain of custody must be observed. The chain of custody is the mass of critical process of evidence documentation. It is a must to assure the court of law that the evidence is authentic. It is the same evidences that crime scene and that it was at all times in custody of person designated to handle it. So, what is the chain of custody? So, it is of paramount importance to any investigation, and it is an unbroken sequence of events that is caused by an item of evidence from the time it is found at the crime scene to the time of appears in court. And Every link in this chain is documented from discovery at the crime scene through evidence gathering, storage, lab analysis, returns to storage, and transfer to court. Every link is documented by date, time, handling, individual, what was done with the evidence by that individual. If chains of custody is broken, if evidence cannot be accounted in one step of its journey from the crime scenes to court room, it is rendered inadmissions useless to the case. And what does chain of custody do? The chain of custody proves the integrity of piece of evidence, and a paper trail is maintained so that the persons who had charge of evidence at any given time can be known quickly and summoned or testified during the trial as and required. And a record of the chain of evidence must be maintained, established in the court. Whenever presenting evidence as exhibits, otherwise, the evidence may be inadmissible in the court, leading to the serious question regarding its legitimacy, integrity, and examination rendered upon it. And that's all for today. Thank you for your listening. God bless and thank you.